Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shaja and these are the headlines. Pakistan's President Dr. Arif Alvi says the country is becoming an economic hub of the region. Addressing the inaugural session of the International Maritime Conference, Alvi said Aman Exercise 2021 is in line with Pakistan's vision of peace and stability. Meanwhile, Naval Chief Admiral Amjad Khan Niazi said the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor will stimulate regional economic transformation. Mario Draghi, the former head of the European Central Bank, has been sworn in as Italy's new prime minister. He secured the support of most of the all main political parties following the collapse of the previous administration last month. The country is grappling with the coronavirus pandemic and is also facing the worst economic crisis in decades. The Saudi-led military coalition in Yemen says it has intercepted and destroyed an armed Houthi drone. A coalition spokesperson said that the drone was launched towards Abha International Airport in Saudi Arabia. This comes after the U.S. revoked the designation of the Houthi rebels as a terrorist organization. The United Nations rights body has unanimously adopted a resolution on Myanmar calling for the restoration of the democratically elected government. It added that all those detained arbitrarily, include state councillor, including Aung San Suu Kyi, must be immediately and unconditionally released. Thousands have taken to the streets across Myanmar for the 8th straight day to protest against the military coup. The World Health Organization says all hypotheses are still open in its search for the origins of COVID-19. Meanwhile, Mexico has reported more than 1,300 COVID-19 deaths for the third day in a row, bringing its toll over 172,000. In Pakistan, 58 more people lost their lives while over 1,200 tested positive for the virus overnight. The country's death toll has reached 12,276. Globally, the number of infections has surpassed 108 million, while the virus has claimed over 2.36 million lives so far. And in cricket, South Africa have put Pakistan to bed after winning the toss in the second T20 at the Gaddafi Stadium. Pakistan lead the three-match series 1-0. It's the first time the two teams are playing a T20 series in Pakistan. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Pakistan's President Dr. Arif Alvi says the country is becoming an economic hub of the region. Addressing the inaugural session of the International Maritime Conference, Alvi said Aman Exercise 2021 is in line with Pakistan's vision of peace and stability. He said blue economy is the future of the world. However, the exploitation of marine resources should benefit all. Alvi added that Pakistan aims for morality-based international cooperation. Meanwhile, Naval Chief Admiral Amjad Khan Niazi said China-Pakistan Economic Corridor will stimulate regional economic transformation. He said the project will relieve China of its Malacca dilemma. Admiral Niazi also thanked the navies of 45 states for their participation in Aman 2021 exercise. Former Chief Minister of occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Mehbooba Mufti, has been put under house arrest. In a tweet, Mufti said she was not allowed to visit South Kashmir's Pulwama to meet the father of the slain youth, Athar Wani. The youth was killed in a fake encounter by Indian forces in Srinagar last year. She described the situation in the occupied valley as a reign of suppression and terror. Nearly 300 Kashmiris have been killed by Indian troops since New Delhi revoked the occupied valley status in August last year. The valley has been under a crippling curfew and communications blackouts since then. In India, the farmer leaders say the government is not showing seriousness to resume talks with the protesters over the contentious farm laws. Addressing media, the union leaders say they are ready for the 12th round of negotiations, but the center must come up with a proposal. They said the protesting farmers will not return to the fields until all of their demands are met. Meanwhile, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi says he will continue to support the farmers. Gandhi said he will take part in the tractor rally at Ajmer today and will also address the farmers' gatherings in Nagaur. Farmers have been camping at several border points in the country's capital, New Delhi, for 78 days. More than 200 protesting farmers have died during the demonstrations, including 4 who committed suicide. In Afghanistan, at least 4 security forces members, including a commander, have been killed in eastern Kunar province. Officials said an explosion targeted the police commander in the Chapadara district. A police spokesperson said 7 police personnel were injured in a separate blast in southern Kandahar province. He said a car packed with explosives targeted a police outpost in Ahandab district. Authorities said a school and a number of nearby houses were damaged in the attack. Earlier, 3 civilians were wounded in a roadside bomb blast in the city of Jalalabad. So far, no group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Mario Draghi, the ex-head of the European Central Bank, has been sworn in as Italy's new prime minister. He secured the support of almost all the main political parties. This follows the collapse of the previous administration last month amid row over how to spend EU coronavirus recovery funds. Italy is grappling with the coronavirus pandemic and is also facing its worst economic crisis in decades. Earlier in a press conference, Draghi unveiled a cabinet involving a mix of technocrats and politicians from his broad coalition. His government will now face a confidence vote next week, a formality given its cross-party backing. The United Nations rights body has unanimously adopted a resolution on Myanmar calling for the restoration of the democratically elected government. The resolution read all those detained arbitrarily, including State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, must be immediately and unconditionally released. The United Nations said that it's essential that life-saving humanitarian assistance continues to be delivered in Myanmar. The United States urged the United Nations member states to target Myanmar's coup leaders with sanctions to promote their accountability. Myanmar's envoy said that the resolution is not acceptable. This comes as thousands of protesters took to the streets across Myanmar against the coup for the 8th straight day. Meanwhile, parliamentarians from Myanmar have called for a United Nations probe into the rights abuses by the military. The Saudi-led military coalition in Yemen says it has intercepted and destroyed an armed Houthi drone. Coalition spokesperson Colonel Turki al-Malki said that the drone was headed towards the Abha International Airport. Turki al-Malki said that the Houthi terror attacks are a systemic and deliberate attempts to target civilians. This comes days after Houthis' drone attack the same airport set ablaze by a plane. Iran has dismissed the E3's remarks condemning Tehran's production of uranium metal. In a tweet, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said Iran's position in line with the 2015 nuclear deal. He said it is not Iran's responsibility to stop the remedial measures it undertook after the United States withdrew from the deal. Zarif also questioned the compliance of the United Kingdom, France, and Germany's obligations to the deal. Earlier, London, Paris, and Berlin called on Iran to stop all activities that violate the 2015 nuclear deal. In a joint statement, the 3 powers said Iran has no justification for producing uranium metal in violation of the accord. The United States says it is re-engaging with the G7 allies to help steer the global economy out of its worst slump. Addressing a G7 meeting virtually, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen reiterated Washington's commitment to multilateralism. Yellen said that the United States places a high priority on deepening its global engagement and strengthening alliances. She called for continued financial support to secure the recovery, saying the time to go big is now. The G7 peers also emphasized ensuring the sustainability of public finances. They also called for reaching an international solution to the tax challenges of the digital economy and declared it a key priority. Former U.S. President Donald Trump's lawyers have termed the incitement of insurrection charge against him a monstrous lie. Their remarks came on day 4 of Trump's impeachment trial as they presented evidence in the United States Senate. Lawyer Michael Van Der Veen said that the impeachment proceedings are a politically motivated witch hunt by the Democrats. Van Der Veen argued that telling the crowd they needed to fight like hell was simply a political speech. He said that the trial is an effort to not just smear Trump, but the 75 million Americans who voted for him. The lawyers also argue that Trump had a legal right to challenge the election result. Earlier, the Democrats had presented new video footage of the Capitol Hill incident, taking the Senate step by step through the riots.
To claim that the president in any way wished, desired, or encouraged lawless or violent behavior is a preposterous and monstrous lie. In fact, the first 2 messages the president sent via Twitter once the incursion of the Capitol began were "Stay peaceful and no violence because we are the party of law and order."
The World Health Organization says all hypotheses are still open in its search for the origins of COVID-19. Meanwhile, Mexico has reported more than 1,300 COVID-19 deaths for the 3rd day in a row, bringing its toll over 172,000. Globally, the number of infections has surpassed 108 million, while the virus has claimed over 2.38 million lives so far. More on the coronavirus in this report.
The spread of the new variants and an unexpected sluggish vaccine rollouts are making governments to keep the curbs in place, even as the number of cases drop. World Health Organization's chief, Tedros Adhanom, confirmed the drop in new cases across the globe, calling the trend encouraging. However, he cautioned against relaxing the restrictions that have allowed the world to reach this point. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has issued new guidance for schools to reopen with masks and rigid health protocols. New York's governor's top aide accuses the administration of delaying the release of data on COVID-19 deaths at nursing homes to avoid a potential federal investigation. Over in South Mexican funeral homes and cemeteries are being overwhelmed with corpses as the country's coronavirus death toll continues to spike.
We're talking about approximately 18,000 graves which have occupied a little more than 40% of the cemetery. But yes, we hope that it does not happen, that we don't get to the point where we have to use a mass grave.
Italy is extending its travel ban between regions by another week, while Portugal is set to extend its border controls until March. France's health authority has become the first to recommend that only 1 dose of the vaccine can be administered to people already infected. In the United Kingdom, the reproduction number of R value of the virus has fallen below 1 for the first time since July. The lower house of the parliament in the Czech Republic has refused to extend a state of emergency as the country deals with a highly contagious variant.
It certainly is about the British variant. What percentage of the variant has gone through the population of the Radek-Kralova region, and what we can expect if a majority of the population has already had it. Thank God, and maybe the number of cases will decrease with time. If not, then the situation can become very dramatic.
Australia's state of Victoria has entered a 5-day lockdown as authorities race to prevent a third wave sparked by the variant first found in the UK. Meanwhile, a new study by the Cleveland Clinic team found that vitamin C and zinc do not do anything to help coronavirus patients.
In Pakistan, more than 58 people have lost their lives to COVID-19, raising the death toll to 12,276. The health ministry says 1,262 people tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry said a total number of cases detected in the country has crossed 561,000. Meanwhile, over 523,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. The number of active COVID-19 cases in the country has topped 25,000. The ministry said nearly 1,700 patients are in critical condition. Pakistan has launched urban forestry on the lines of Japanese technique to fight pollution. In a tweet, Prime Minister Imran Khan said Miwa Ki method helps grow trees 10 times faster and 30 times denser. He said 50 sites have been chosen in Lahore for the plantations. Khan said that the first experiment of the technique was done at Liberty Roundabout in Lahore last year. Earlier, he also addressed the inauguration of the Spring Plantation 2021 and kicked off the project at Lahore's Jilani Park. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, in Somalia, at least 3 people have been killed as a car bomb detonated near a security checkpost in the capital city of Mogadishu. Officials say 8 others were wounded in the attack near the parliament compound. Officials said that a car packed with explosives sped through a security checkpost in front of the Wihli Hotel. It said that it detonated at the checkpoint to the National Assembly headquarters after being fired by the police officers. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack. British human rights lawyer Karim Khan has been elected as the new prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Khan won a secret ballot against 3 other candidates to replace the lead prosecutor Fatou Bensouda. Khan said, who is also the Queen's Counsel, is best known for heading the United Nations Special Investigation into ISIS crimes in Iraq. Britain's Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said Khan's extensive experience will be pivotal to gain justice for the victims of crimes. The position of the prosecutor of Court War Tribunal is a politically daunting position whose incumbent was slapped with a U.S. sanction. The United Nations has urged the United States to relax Venezuela-related sanctions. UN Special Rapporteur Alina Duhan said that the United States and European Union curbs on Venezuela are worsening its humanitarian crisis. In a recent report, Duhan called for granting Venezuelan government access to funds frozen in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Portugal. She also called for the implementation of cooperation agreements between Venezuela and the United Nations Human Rights Office.
While recognizing the devastating effect of unilateral sanctions on the broad scope of human rights, especially the right to food, right to health, right to life, right to education, and right to development, I call the government of Venezuela and the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights to implement fully cooperation agreements signed between them.
Meanwhile, the Venezuelan opposition has labeled the UN recommendation as regime propaganda. Now moving on, in Chile, hundreds of anti-government protesters hit the streets of the capital, Santiago, calling for an end to inequality. Police in riot gear used water cannons and tear gas to disperse the demonstrators. The protesters have been calling for reforms to existing pension, healthcare, and education systems. The South American country has seen protests against stark inequality for over a year now. Chileans voted in favor of a new charter to replace the country's Pinochet-era constitution in October last year. In Ecuador, the election authority says it will conduct a partial recount of the presidential poll following a request from 2 candidates. The 2 are vying for the right to face left-wing economist Andres Arias in April's presidential runoff. Elections Council President Diana Atamain said that a recount will be carried out in the Goiás province, where the outcome was strongly questioned. In a statement, Ameante said that 50% of the vote in 16 other provinces will also be reviewed. She added that the final results will be announced after the completion of the review process, which is a part of the electoral package.
100% of the voting of province of Guayas will be reviewed, including the ballots with inconsistencies. Secondly, we will review 50% of the voting in 16 provinces. It is important to emphasize that it is a process of reviewing the votes within the electoral package.
It's now time to take a look at the weather around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.